Hello friends, thanks to you, I'm not talking to myself. That would be crazy anyway. For those who subscribed already to my YouTube channel, thank you very much. For those who haven't subscribed, please try and subscribe. Just click on the red button. That way, anytime I make new videos, YouTube will notify you. It doesn't take anything from you, it doesn't cost anything. So all it does is, whenever I make my videos, it's going to send you a notification. Like, oh, there's a new video from Your Skill TV. You click on it and then you watch it. You get to be one of the first to watch my new videos. For those who have been following, if you can recall, some time ago I did a video that had to do with about fertilizer application. And on that video, I told you organic chemical fertilizer is not actually my preferred option. That day I told you my preferred option was composting. And that is what we're going to talk about today. So today, get ready, we're going to talk about composting. Hello, you at the corner. Give us a definition of composting. You. Yes, you. No, don't mind that. No. For those who already know about our channel, this is not an academic channel. We want to keep things as simple as possible. This is not an agricultural science class. So I have to try and tell you what composting is, as in my simplest way. I'm sorry to disappoint you, Professor, if you think I'm going to bring out all the jargons. No. So composting, what is compost? Compost is nothing but plant food which is as a result of decomposed or decayed organic materials, which normally you find in the wild when leaves drop and decay. Some animals leave their waste and everything mixed up together and then form that rich black or brownish topsoil which you use in your agriculture. That's simply composting. The professors and the scientists, they have already done a lot of research on this, on composting, and they discovered the way nature does it. And they came up with a way that we can help nature to improve on it. So what's wrong with how nature does it? When nature does it, there's a time delay. It can take a long time. It can go for like 6 months, 12 months, or even more before you get your good composting that will easily release to the plants. So after having a look at how nature does it, they came up with some principles. We're not going to bother ourselves with how the scientists came up with those principles. What we're going to do today is to try and apply those principles and see how we can help ourselves and speed up the production of compost in a confined environment or in our own environments.
There are two components that go into production of compost. Those are the green components and the brown components. The green components mainly provide the moisture and the nitrogen into the mix and some other nutrients as well, while the browns are the carbon source. So they provide the carbon that go into the mix. They are also good and required for providing air pockets so that all the microorganisms that go into production of compost, that go into acting on the compost to break it down, so that they have some air to work with.
The green components of compost production are things like grass cuttings, Like when you mow your lawn, you collect all the grass and then you use it for compost. Things like the clippings or leaves, like when you prune your garden, you collect all the leaves, or when you clear your bush, instead of burning it, because burning damages the soil as well. So instead of burning the grass, the clipping, the cuttings, you collect them and use them to do compost. Then the other two are actually brownish in color, but they are classified as greens. They are the animal wastes, like when you collect cow dungs or from your piggery, the waste that the pigs leave behind, or when you clean up your poultry, all the waste that the birds leave. But what you don't include are things like your pet waste from your pets, like your cats and your dogs. You don't include them in compost. You don't also include human waste, because those two contain a lot of diseases. So you better keep them away from your compost. Then another thing that, even though it's brown, can be classified as green is tea bags, used tea bags, and used ground coffee granules. Like after preparing your coffee, if you're one of those that grind your coffee, you collect them, or your tea bags, but make sure there's no milk. You have to keep milk away from it. The brown components are things like wood shavings, sawdust, shredded papers, your old newspapers. Those also go into production of compost.
If, like me, you grew up close to your grannies, or if you grew up in the village, you would be interested in what I'm going to talk about now. Another group of things that go into composting are peelings. Yam peelings, cassava peelings, cocoyam peelings, banana skin, plantain skin, all those peelings, food scraps, not the cooked food with oil and all the rest of them, no, but like when you process your food for your vegetables for cooking, even your leftover vegetables, all of them go into composting. And if you grew up in the village, or if you were close to your grannies, you will know, for instance, in Igbo land, we have what we call mbobo, which are the back and front gardens that we normally have, where we get fresh produce to do, immediate availability of fresh produce for cooking. So if you have that experience, this will not come as a surprise to you, because when you are pouring all those things in your garden, you're actually producing compost, even though they didn't call it composting per se. That's exactly what you're doing. You're providing the green components that go into production of the compost. In order to facilitate easy compost making, which is what we want to achieve, in other words, we want to speed up the process instead of the way the nature makes it, which takes extraordinarily long time. So to make the process quicker, we have to create
a good balance of moisture and air. So in order to create that good balance, the container which you're going to use to make the compost is very, very important. On the screen now are various forms of containers. Some of them you can buy from the shop and some of them you can make by yourself. The first one, the plastic one, has a hatch at the bottom, so you keep topping up your components from the top, making sure you maintain the adequate mix of the greens and the browns. For instance, if you introduce a layer of the greens, the next time you have to introduce something, you introduce the browns, and so on, and you keep alternating it. This is because, like we already explained, the greens are like the moisture component of it, and the browns provide the air pockets. It increases the air circulation within the container. So if you introduce those in alternate forms, at the bottom, that is where you take your compost when the process is completed. It might take a little bit time, but depending on how warm your climate is or your weather is, it can be available in less than no time. The ones at the bottom, the one on the bottom left, you can use your wood to get some wood and then make a box where you heap all the leaves and dry leaves, and then whatever components you want to introduce into the compost heap. And from time to time, you use your garden fork to turn the leaves, the content, so as to bring out the ones that are, because usually they are hot in the middle when the composting starts to take place. So you bring out the hot ones from the inside and then introduce the ones outside. As you keep turning them, like every 2 weeks or every week, they eventually, from within some months, you get your compost done. The one in the middle, on the bottom row in the middle, is similar to the one on the left. It's just that this one is large enough for you to even, drive in your wheelbarrow. So the one on the right is a do-it-yourself something that you can construct by yourself, and it's made from drums, the type of drums that you use to store your water. Just make a hatch and construct it just the way it is and make a stand for it. And the added advantage in this one is that you can, as you pour your components, it's easier to turn the drum, and also by so doing it steers the content so that there will be equal distribution of heat and moisture and everything, so that it's supposed to facilitate the composting. And for all this, most times, people just dump their composting and forget about it. But it's always good to attend to it, from time to time you check. If it is too dry, then you can just sprinkle some water. Not too much of water anyway. It has to be moist. It doesn't have to be wet. So if it's wet, it starts to smell and your neighbors will come and knock on your door. So just let it be moist. And then if it's too wet, you can then introduce some wood shavings and some dry components. You just make sure you maintain the balance, and then with time, in less than no time, you get your nice rich compost for your planting, and you don't have to spend so much money trying to buy fertilizer, and fertilizer that will eventually damage your crops or damage your water table or damage your soil as well. So what are the things that give composting the advantage over fertilizer application. Fertilizers, chemical fertilizers, most times find their way onto the water table, and then when you sink your borehole, you get it in the water you drink. Then, secondly, they can also find their way into the food chain, unlike composting. The microorganisms in the soil are most times damaged by the harmful chemicals, by the chemicals which are used in fertilizing the soil. Unlike composting actually improves those microorganisms. It supports them to multiply. The cost element in using chemical fertilizer is so high that, unlike composting, where most of the things you use are actually waste products, things that you don't even need, that you don't even pay anything to acquire. The availability as well. Even if you decide to use fertilizer, chemical fertilizer, most times they're hard to find. In Africa and some third world countries, most fertilizers sold there are like generic fertilizers. Even when you need only one component, you can't get in the ratio that you want. Easy application. Chemical fertilizer requires a lot of technicality in trying to get the right balance, or apply it at the right time and so on, the right proportion and so on. But for composting, it's so simple to apply. It's not all that. It's not technical. Then for conservation of your soil, most times when you use chemical fertilizer over time, your soil becomes dead and damaged. Unlike composting, which actually promotes living organisms in the soil, prevents erosion, which is a very, very, very big issue when it comes to southern Nigeria. It prevents evaporation of moisture from the soil for places where there's not enough rainfall all through the year. When you mulch with using the compost, you actually help in making the soil retain as much moisture as possible. It also prevents leaching, in which case, instead of water to go straight onto the, far away into the soil, where the roots of the crops will not reach it, they act like a sponge to hold the moisture and make it available within the root levels. So, having said all this, now you know why I prefer composting to use of chemical fertilizers.
Thanks for sticking around to this point. On the screen are bags of compost, the way they are sold in Europe, America, and Asia. Unfortunately, this sector of the economy is underexploited in Africa. I'm not very sure if any country in Africa produces compost and package it in this way. If you have a clue, or if you know any country, please write it in the comment section, and I will appreciate it. But as far as I know, this is a section of economy which is virtually unexploited, and for southern Nigeria, it is very, very, very easy to start business. All it requires is if you have any land, or some people might even let you, cut the grass, cut the grass and collect them and produce compost. All you have to spend is the time that you have to wait for it to mature, and probably the money you use to buy your containers. If you have farm already, it's also a potential money spinner. When you clear your land for cropping, most times you go through a lot of stress trying to dispose of the rubbish that you got from the farm, and most times people rake them together and set them on fire, which in turn damages the environment. So it will be very, very, very important and very, very rewarding if somebody can convert those rubbish into money